So in this video, we're going to look at the transition from Brezhnev to Gorbachev. So this is not so much a video looking at a huge amount that was going on, but really in the 3 years from the death of Brezhnev to Gorbachev, to kind of look at the continuation of the Soviet Union so that we can meet the learning objectives. So the point of this is to understand the years of transition between the two, and to understand the causes of Soviet collapse under Gorbachev. So we've been talking about Brezhnev and all of this stuff that has been happening that is, or has not been happening, that's going to eventually lead to collapse. But these 3 years are also important. Follow Brezhnev was Andropov. One thing that we know about the Brezhnev regime is that they worked for those 18 years to as much as possible to maintain the stability of the governing body. So maintain the stability of the Politburo, and the result would be just to maintain the stability of everything happening in the country. So no upsetting the apple cart, no rocking the boat, just going with the flow. But the result of this, as we know, is huge economic problems that essentially were hidden. Now, Brezhnev dies in November 1982, but there had been concerns about his health since the 1960s. And as we get into 1980, he has a series of strokes. And this triggers a struggle for power. Now, there were two dudes, really, who were close to getting it, and Brezhnev seemed to support Chernenko. But Chernenko doesn't win. Andropov is appointed by the Politburo as the general secretary. And essentially, Chernenko had the support of the Brezhnevites, those of the Brezhnev mafia, but Andropov had the support of the military and the KGB. And the support of those two groups helped him to come into power. And he had also had, I guess, bona fides, right? He knew what was going on. He had crushed a Hungarian attempt at liberalization in the 1950s. And he was the former head of the KGB. Therefore, the thing is that he full well knew what the economic situation is. Despite what was being said by the government in the media, as the head of the KGB, he literally knew where all of the bodies were buried. And he also had international connections. Part of being, the head of the spy organization. So he had a lot of knowledge about what was going on outside of the world. And so what he wanted was to reform the Soviet economy. He was full well aware of the problems that the Soviet Union was going to have later on. He was not one for liberalizing anything because, hey, as we said, he was all about crushing liberal attempts in Hungary. But he needed the Soviet economy to be more efficient. And he went about doing this in a number of ways. He started by appointing younger party members, people who wanted reform. Remember that the Brezhnev mafia pretty much had a lockdown on the top political positions. Andropov is churning some of that up, and he starts appointing people who want change, the people who had been trying to change things but were blocked by Brezhnev and his supporters. And so one of the people who's going to come up is Gorbachev. Now, Andropov countered the idea of developed socialism. Brezhnev was like, hey, we've reached it, we've attained socialism, therefore everything is hunky-dory. Andropov was like, no, we got lots of problems, we got lots of work to do, we gotta fix this, but in Russian. So Andropov is not going to focus on social issues so much. He's not going to focus on liberalizing or giving people more civil rights. He's the former head of the KGB. He's not down with that. But he needs to fix the economy. And one of the biggest problems in the Soviet economy was this extremely high rate of absenteeism. On any day, something like 30% of the workforce would be out due to personal problems. And so he created something called the People's Control Inspectorate to inspect and make sure that people were coming into work in order to earn the money they were supposed to be earning. Remember, people are pretty much guaranteed wages. There were lots of speeches extolling the virtues of hard work, trying to play on people's nationalism, and, I don't know, guilting people into going to work. And really trying to get people engaged in the work process, like having a reason to go to work. And the biggie is there were attempts at curbing alcoholism. And this was because a huge amount of those personal problems was because people were hungover or drunk and couldn't come to work. So they are trying to reduce the amount of drinking, and the idea would be then people would have, the ability to work. The party newspaper chronicled abuses. So he continued some of Khrushchev's work looking at crushing corruption. And so in the party newspaper, they shamed people, essentially. People within the party, people in charge of things, for their lack of work and their lack of commitment to the whole program. He also implemented some incentivizing programs to increase productivity. So, for example, managers are giving more power in decision making. They're trying to link productivity to government support. They're trying to link bonuses and wages to productivity. The whole point is to get people in there working. And so he tried to use a multi-pronged approach, right? The curbing alcoholism, shaming people, incentivizing it through money and stuff like that. He also tried to incentivize other parts of the economy, allowing people to set up small private businesses so that you have a portion of the economy that is not directly controlled by the government. He also allowed for some greater dissent. So people could communicate their dissatisfaction without fear of being sent to a mental institution. He attempted the reduction in arms because, as we know, ever since the beginning of this second Cold War and the U.S. ramping up production, that means that the Soviet Union has to keep on par. And this was eating into the funds of the Soviet Union, taking up valuable resources and reducing the ability for the country to produce consumer goods, which would stimulate economic development. But again, as we watched in the previous videos, this is the time of Reagan, and Reagan was not down with that. And this is also the time of Thatcher, and you have the same thing. There was an attempt to reduce the party bureaucracy, so streamline the process. And also remember, if you're in the bureaucracy, you're guaranteed employment, right? So just kind of streamline the process and the functioning of the government. However, he's only in power for 15 years. I mean, I lie, 15 months. Numbers, things, counters, which is one of the reasons why everything is attempt. Andropov himself recognized when he came to power that he was going to need 10 years in order for the things that he was doing to come to fruition. But he only has 15 months. Comes into power because you still have at this time a lot of the Brezhnevites still in position, and they're able to get the guy that they want in. Dude is like 72 years old. I'm pretty sure this is not going to work out too well. Now, Chernenko basically puts all of the reforms that Andropov had begun on hold. He favored stability. He is a Brezhnevite. And so, not much change. No changes to the Politburo, very few new ministers appointed. It's just a same old guard. He did continue to work against corruption, and he did put more investment in education. Chernenko attempted rapprochement with the West, but that was not happening because, as we've spoken about before, the U.S. has their Star Wars program happening, and there is a refusal to back down on that. The Soviet has a continued presence in Afghanistan. It's not until Gorbachev does a withdrawal from Afghanistan begin. And that is a very, very sore point with the U.S. So again, there's not going to be an ability for people to come to some sort of agreement. So in response, the Soviet Union boycotts the '84 Olympics, which were held in Los Angeles. And again, he dies in March 1985. So he was in power for, again, a very short period of time. With the death of Chernenko, the people who really wanted that change managed to get Gorbachev into power as general secretary. And Gorbachev was a protege of Andropov. So again, under Andropov, he had been moving up the ladder anyway. And so in the time of Chernenko, he was able to solidify his position and gain additional supporters so that he was able to come to power. Now, Gorbachev is only 54, and this is crazy young for the Soviet Union at this time. He was literally the youngest person in the entire Politburo. He's younger, he's flexible, he's energetic, and he's going to bring about a lot of change. He understood that the Communist Party in the Soviet Union and the economy needed a huge amount of reform. And this is what we're going to be looking at in the next set of videos, looking at Gorbachev's domestic policies and foreign policies, and the changes that that is going to bring about into the Soviet Union. And here's your surprise! I know it's cheesy, but I feel great.